I'm very looking forward to Bitcoin going mainstream. This is what we all want after all. Can I introduce onto the stage Martel Fox, woo! Natalie Brunel, Margot Paez, and that was it.
Thank you, everyone, for that wonderful round of applause. Happy birthday, Harris. Hope you're having a great day today. We're joined with two incredible trailblazing women in Bitcoin today to talk about Bitcoin going mainstream. We have Margot Paez here with us. She's a climate change physicist. She's also a PhD candidate at the Georgia Institute of Technology. She holds 2 master's degrees, one in physics and one in ethnomusicology. And most importantly of all, she's a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Then, of course, we have Natalie Brunel, the host of the Coin Stories podcast and brand new Hard Money show, where she covers the latest Bitcoin news and interviews prominent voices in both Bitcoin and economics. Natalie comes from a mainstream news background and now frequently comments on American financial television news programs about Bitcoin and why we need to return to sound money. And my name is Martel Fox. I'm your host today, and I'm the Chief People Officer at IBEX and advisor at Apollo. So, we're going to explore the idea of Bitcoin going mainstream. We're going to talk about what mainstream means. If we aren't there yet today, how are we going to get there? And what are the challenges and how we can overcome them? Before we get into that, let's get to know our panelists a little bit more. So Margot, I want to know from you, what got you interested in Bitcoin in the first place?
Well, I was always a computer nerd, so I learned about Bitcoin pretty early, but I didn't have any understanding of money, so I didn't make anything out of it. And in 2018, though, I started seeing people get deplatformed from content creator websites like Naomi Wu, for example, aka Sexy Cyborg. So I had this idea that I could create a different type of content creator platform which would cater towards more marginalized groups. And I realized that they were extremely vulnerable to the payment processing system. There's really only a couple of payment processors, Stripe and PayPal. Those are really the only ones that have reasonable fees, and also they don't require you to put, your life savings down as collateral for a merchant account. But if you do something that they deem to be unsavory, then you can just be totally banned from the payment processing network, and then you can no longer make money online. And I thought, and I had seen that actually happen in real time. So I realized at that moment that Bitcoin, this thing that I had seen and even played around with, at that moment I finally really understand, oh yeah, this is really important. Having a payment network that simply exists outside of the existing system is really important. And so that's when I really started to get into Bitcoin and tried to learn as much about it.
Incredible. And Natalie, yourself?
I think a lot of people come to Bitcoin from a pain point, and my pain point was my family's loss of everything in the financial crisis. So we immigrated from Poland when I was very little, and my parents grew up under communism, so I grew up with a very strict mom who was very skeptical of the government, very skeptical of all the narratives that were out in media, and we watched a lot of news when I was little. So I grew up wanting to become, the people that I saw, Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer. I thought, what a beautiful, noble profession. You get to hold the powerful accountable, and you get to meet people from all backgrounds and really learn where they come from. So I pursued journalism, and while I was in college, I was about to graduate, financial crisis hit, and my family went under. So they came here, or to the US rather, for the American dream. They never asked for handouts or help. They started from scratch. My mom was 38, my dad was 41, and they came for economic opportunity. And just as they were finally able to afford their first home, this little town home outside of Chicago, they went under. They lost everything and filed for bankruptcy. And I was just entering entering into my working life and right into a recession. And my first job paid me less than an internship that I had in college. And I had in the back of my mind this question of, how could this happen? Why did this happen? And why did the big companies, the big banks, the rich people, why did they get bailed out? And my family, who worked so hard, were really good people who just wanted, a good life for their family, a middle-class life. Why did they get screwed financially? And so I entered into the working world as a journalist, and I didn't know that I was searching for Bitcoin. My mom was like a sound money person. She appreciated gold, but I didn't really learn about economics in school. I studied journalism and how to tell a story and how to synthesize information and distill it to something a general audience can understand, but I didn't know what money printing was. I didn't understand the history of money. And so when I discovered Bitcoin, at first I was extremely skeptical. Did not get it, thought it was a stock, completely risky. And then someone 2 years later gave me the Bitcoin Standard, followed up by Price of Tomorrow and some of the other books. And I was like, it was a huge aha moment, because all of a sudden it was this culmination of all these things I had wondered about, thought about, struggled through, and also reported on, the increasing division and the decline of the middle class and the death of the American dream. And I was like, oh, that's why it happened, and here's the solution.
Wow, thank you for that. Yeah, well deserved. So, bringing it back to our main topic, Bitcoin going mainstream, this can mean many things. It could be number of people adopting Bitcoin. It could be the price. Sorry about that. Political acceptance as well. I'd love to hear from each of you. How would you define mainstream compared to where we are today?
How do we define mainstream versus where we are today?
Sorry, 1 second. How would you define mainstream itself?
Oh goodness. That's such a broad comment. I mean, I think it really depends on an individual definition or what your own vision of what you think Bitcoin adoption should look like. I think...
Or perhaps can I rephrase the question? Before we dive into what Bitcoin going mainstream is, what would you define mainstream to begin with?
I'll let you do that, Natalie.
Sure. Well, so I was a mainstream news journalist. So I would just say that, for the general audience, we have so much specialization, especially today with the decentralization of media and information, and people have all these different specialties. But in general, what can the average person understand when it comes to Bitcoin? And that's really the audience that I speak to. That's how I was trained, was, when I go on the news, I'm talking to people from all walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds, all income levels, and what's something that's going to matter to them, what's going to strike at the heart of what they're going to care about. And I try to think about that whenever I spread the message of Bitcoin, because at the end of the day, there are universal themes that everyone resonates with. And I think one of them is hope, and the other is economic opportunity, and the other is connection. I read this book when I was in journalism school that now when I now am an adjunct professor and I teach journalism, and it was called Aim for the Heart. Because all of us, no matter what the story is, if you capture someone's emotion and curiosity and make them feel like they can relate in some way, all of us have gone through struggle or tragedy, ups and downs. No matter what the story subject is, if you can just capture a little bit of the heart of the matter, then you could get someone's attention and maybe spark curiosity so that they learn a little bit more. Because obviously Bitcoin is a journey. It's not, you hear about it once in a 60-second soundbite and you get it and you buy some. You have to start that process, and I only have always a limited amount of time on TV, and so my hope is that with just a little bit of time, I pull on someone's heartstring, I pull on an emotion that resonates with them so that they think, I want to learn more.
Well said. Natalie, actually you're often in the mainstream press and you communicate with a more mainstream audience than many other Bitcoiners. What are the biggest challenges you see when you interact with your audience and the people you might interview?
I think the biggest challenge is the lack of education and financial literacy. So as I mentioned before, I didn't know what money printing was before Bitcoin. I went to really good universities and schools in the United States because my parents, as immigrants, they drilled the importance of education. And I had the strictest parents that always, forced me to study, and I'm very grateful for that. But I went to good schools and studied very hard and did all the advanced, everything, never learned what money printing was. I didn't learn anything about bonds or how to invest, and I had to seek out that knowledge for myself. And so I often think about that now because I see my peers and my colleagues, my former colleagues, and I know that they're smart, and I know that they have good intentions. They want to do good work within journalism, but unfortunately, they are operating within this system that is completely manipulated, and they have no idea what's broken with it and what's wrong. And I think that the most important thing that Bitcoiners can do is first educate people on what the problem is, and then they can appreciate Bitcoin as a potential solution. So I think the biggest challenge is really that lack of awareness and financial literacy, because you're basically telling someone that everything that they've learned, they now have to unlearn, or it's wrong. And that's very challenging for some people, especially when they've benefited from the current system. I think for young people it's easier, right? The younger people are really into crypto at large, this revolution that, maybe they can purchase a token and it'll lift off and they'll become a millionaire overnight, because they feel left behind. They want a seat at the table because the current financial system has left them behind and it hasn't worked for them. But at large, I think that there's just a hurdle, because you're basically telling people that everything that they know is not what it is. So that's the biggest challenge.
And Margot, so your work in environmental climate change physics, everyone knows there's a lot of controversy surrounding the intersection of Bitcoin and climate issues. What do you think the mainstream perception is right about and wrong about when it comes to Bitcoin and climate?
Oh, well, there's obvious things, like they're wrong about how energy markets work, they're wrong about energy consumption, they're wrong about Bitcoin, I guess, in that regard. What they get right, it's important to be skeptical, and I think it's important to call out bad actors in the mining industry, and so I think that is good to get that right. And I think it's hard for us sometimes to accept that, but we have to be held accountable. So I think that's important, and that's when I think that the reporters are doing a good job. But when they take one report, one publication, academic publication, and they make this claim that therefore Bitcoin is melting the planet, or it's going to it's going to consume all of the world's energy by 2020, and freaks everybody out. And it's totally based off really bad methodology, because there's not enough scientific literacy in those reporters who are writing these stories. I think that's really problematic. And I think it would be nice if the media would talk with actual Bitcoiners like myself or Troy Cross, and actually ask us questions to get feedback and to clear up misconceptions to improve their reporting. But usually they turn to Alex DeVries instead. So I don't know why he's seen as an impartial person when he's a Dutch central banker, who doesn't have a science degree. He has a master's in economics.
So great. That's the great mainstream perception. And what about for people that you're working alongside in your programs, or other climate change physicists? What do you think their perceptions are right now?
It's whatever they hear in the news, then it's bad. Bitcoin is bad. Why are you doing this kind of thing? I've tried to talk with a guy who is within my social network named Peter Kalmus. He's a scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where I used to be an intern. And he's within my social network, like he knows my friends, but we don't actually know each other. We follow each other on Twitter. And I've tried to talk with him on Twitter about Bitcoin, probably the worst place to do that, but he can't. It's just bad, it's terrible. You're just a crypto bro, And I can't believe you call yourself, a climate change physicist or whatever. I can't believe you claim to be a climate activist, things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in changing those narratives with people in that community.
Yeah. And to turn a more positive note, what progress have you both observed toward Bitcoin going mainstream?
I mean, I've definitely seen more interest and more requests, especially from media outlets wanting me to come on and talk about it. And I think that happens with every bull run. I know 2017 was also a really big year where more outlets focused on what is Bitcoin and why are people talking about it. That's probably around the time when CNBC added it as a ticker, and now all of a sudden they care about the Bitcoin price. And then every bear market, there are all the headlines that say Bitcoin is dead, which is really ironic since it obviously is still around, getting stronger and stronger. But I will say that it's fascinating, the psychology of the FOMO, because during a bull market, everyone wants to talk about it. There's so much more attention, and then suddenly it falls off a cliff with the crash, and the attention turns very negative again. So I think we're going to see another surge, the next bull market. I expect there to be even more reporters that are specializing in it. Now we see things like Bloomberg Crypto and different, networks that are really focusing on this area. And I'm grateful for the opportunities that have come with that, because I didn't necessarily even expect to go back into sort of television news when I left to do my podcast and education. So I think that it just comes in waves. I did my first story actually on Bitcoin in 2017. I pitched a story for my local station in Sacramento, California, which is the state capital. And I did it on like an ATM that was in a local mall, and I got so much pushback because the management, which again doesn't understand Bitcoin, doesn't even understand our financial system, thought that they were worried that I was essentially hawking a financial product and that they could get sued. So a lot of pushback. I did a few more when I was in Los Angeles, but again, in general, everything gets lumped together. Bitcoin, crypto, everything's kind of, all my headlines when I go on Fox News, it's like crypto, Bitcoin, crypto. They have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin listed in the ticker with the prices, and I try to always make the distinction that it's very, very different and focus on how Bitcoin is addressing the broken money, but it still gets lost on a lot of people. So there needs to be some work there, and I hope that more reporters take the time to educate themselves, because there is a lot of opportunity. There really is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about conflating Bitcoin and crypto. I think, when I think of like Bitcoin going mainstream, I think right now what I see is crypto being mainstream and not Bitcoin, at least not the Bitcoin philosophy. And for example, like with the Super Bowl, there were tons of ads. It was insane. There was like this Pong ad for one of the exchanges, and it was like Crypto.com bought off the football field in Los Angeles, yeah. Right? Or the basketball team, the Staples Center, I think, is now a Crypto Center or something. So, yeah, that's definitely, I see that mainstream. People are getting into that, but the actual deep down root of it, of what is really Bitcoin, I don't think that has emerged fully into the mainstream mind or of just everyday people. Because, like Natalie said, they conflate the two. They think Bitcoin is just, all these other shit coins. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
I heard there was somewhere where I was supposed to put money if I said a bad word.
Exactly.
Sorry, Jim. I mean, I see that. So I think that's gone mainstream, but I think we're still a long way of really, truly Bitcoin being there, where people understand it and people are using it. That I think we're still working towards.
Do you think, is it an education problem or an image problem?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I just think it's so important to educate people of influence because, I mean, whether it's a social media person or an actress or someone within the news, some people have bigger followings and people listen to what they have to say. They buy what they're selling, essentially, and those are the people that really, a lot of them just don't understand, and they conflate the two. And I've experienced that because I live in Los Angeles, and Hollywood is there, and there are a lot of influential people, from the Matt Damons to the Reese Witherspoons, that are sort of getting into the space, but again, they're getting into crypto, not Bitcoin. And I'm reaching out. I've reached out to their PR teams and their media folks, and I've said, hey, if they need someone to sit down with, I will do it for free, but can I talk to this person? Because you see Reese Witherspoon, she's trying so hard to get more women in this space, but through NFTs and like the metaverse and all of that. And the same with some of these other celebrities, and it's because no one has educated them, but for whatever reason they don't. It's so hard to cross that barrier of, hey, the financial system's broken. Can I talk to you about economics and monetary theory and the history of money? It's like no.
I just want to about Hayek.
Yeah, I want to support female entrepreneurs that are making JPEGs, whatever. And it's so challenging. And if you guys have ideas, let me know, because we have to reach people of influence so that they hit their followers and their audiences, and it's just it's like a ripple effect. But it's a challenge.
Absolutely. And do you think Bitcoin is ready for the mainstream? Can it really be for everyone? And if not, how can we bridge the gap?
Yeah, I think we still need a lot to do on the development side. I think that's why some of us in the community like to say Bitcoin is for anyone right now, because there's still a lot of people who need Bitcoin but don't yet have the right technology, right? The internet is not reliable where they live. Their phone, maybe they can't afford a phone. Maybe they really need strong privacy tools, and we don't yet have those intuitive and simple capabilities built into the network. And I think that's really important for adoption, because we can't forget that is really the most important part of having a monetary network that exists outside of government control, which is that you have to really prioritize that censorship resistance, that making it difficult to be confiscated. These to me are really key components. So we do have a lot of work there. We also have to do more work on the community side. In the West, we're very individualistic. So for us, we're like, not your keys, not your coin, use self-custody. But in other parts of the world, they don't think that way. They're community-oriented, and they value community leaders. And so for them, they're okay with a certain level of custodianship within the community. So like yesterday, we had Obi on the panel, and he has his company Fedi, and they're building out the Fedi Mint, and these are these Chamian banks, and it's all really cool, and that I think will really help with greater adoption in these areas and provide a certain amount of additional privacy. So I'm really hopeful that we'll start to see this build out more over the next few years, and I think that's really going to help a lot to make Bitcoin mainstream, because it's really those who live under these oppressive regimes that need it the most. And then, when the dollar collapses, Natalie, we'll have those tools too.
Yeah. The elites are the few, and the majority, the many, are us. And that's why I'm so inspired by this idea that there could be the greatest wealth transfer in history back to the people that are the productive members of society, the people who are the working class, the labor class. And every person that I interviewed when I was a reporter, I thought of my parents, and I tried to represent as best as I could that idea of the struggle of just wanting to provide for your family, which so many people feel like every year it's harder and harder, the goalpost moves. And when I learned about Bitcoin, that idea of low time preference resonated so much with me, because I thought about how stressed I always was about financial security, how I didn't know how to plan for my future because education was so expensive and the cost of houses has gone up so much. So it disadvantages the younger generations who are now, wanting to afford a house on a salary that's way less than what their, parents earned when they were their age. And it's this constant cycle as we spiral into debt with really no solution until Bitcoin. And thank God for Bitcoin. And I'm so grateful that, it's for everyone. It is accessible to everyone. It provides the opportunity for property rights to 8 billion people, provides access to finally being able to save in all these different countries and all these different forms of oppressive government. I think that we should return to the idea of saving and providing value, and Bitcoin provides me with so much hope that eventually we will truly take from, like Robin Hood, we will take from the rich who have benefited from the Cantillon effect and the monetary spigot because they've been close to it, and we're going to redistribute it to people who are producing value.
Thank you. So, audience, we have a few minutes left. If anyone would like to ask a question to our two panelists here. You there?
Hello? Okay. My question is Bitcoin or could Bitcoin be a feminist issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Anita Posch talks about that a lot in her work. That this is her fight against the patriarchy, and I think that this is definitely. It's a subversive tool. So any form of oppression, it can subvert it. For example, like in Afghanistan, there were women who were using Bitcoin because they were not allowed to carry money themselves. And by having Bitcoin, no one could take it from them, so they could actually save. I think, yeah, absolutely.
So obviously, if you look around this room, it's 90% men. I would love to see more women in Bitcoin, and I'm going to say right now, I am proud to be a woman and proud to be a woman in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin is for boomers. Bitcoin is for young people. Bitcoin is for minorities. It is for immigrants, everybody. And I'm so excited by that. And I think that there is, in my opinion, a difference in how men and women approach certain things. There's more men in engineering and in the computer sciences and in finance, because I think men's brains, they like to tinker with things and fix things, whereas women are more interested in people. And so you see more women in roles that have to do with communication, with just caring for others and social aspects. And so I think that as more women come in, more women will be invited because we thrive in a sense of community. And I think we are nurturers by nature, and so we want to help people. And so I really encourage women to get involved. And again, I totally get it when people are like, hey, Bitcoin's not for any gender or whatever, it's for everyone. I get it. But I'm a woman. I'm happy that I'm a woman. I love to see other women in Bitcoin. And I think that will naturally grow. Women will bring in other women as well as men. Men will bring in their wives, their girlfriends, their daughters. It's going to happen. It's slowly happening. But I really look forward to when there are more women in general in this space.
One more question over there.
Yeah, it's not as much a question as a statement, but two things. I have a 22-year-old daughter. I'm choking up. I would love her to grow up to be like you girls, okay? I mean that sincerely. So.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And then secondly, I spent my career on Wall Street. Some of you know. The best traders I've ever met are women. And I say that sincerely because men tend to overthink shit, whereas women remove emotion by and large when they're trading. So I see a brilliant future for women in Bitcoin, not because they're going to trade it, because they break things down into first principles. Okay, so thank you for this, you guys.
Thank you, Greg.
Great. Well,
I think we made Greg Foss cry.
yeah.
Greg's great.
Thank you all for being here today. We're going to finish up this panel right now, and we have a bit of a surprise for you as well. So,
Oh, nice.
thank you, ladies. So, a video's going to